Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney Lawless. I am an evolutionary astrologer. And today I have Kay Taylor, who I'm going to give you all of her details. But I did want to tell you that Kay is joining me here today. And I'm so grateful because we're going to be talking about 2025 transits, specifically about Saturn going into Aries and all the things that is going to entail. And so, Kay, welcome. I just want to
Oh,
first say welcome.
thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So Kay is the president of OPA, which is the Organization of Professional Astrologers, which is an amazing organization. So if you are an astrologer, a professional, amateur, or just a fangirl or fanboy, OPA is amazing. I'm going to put all of this information down below, but Kay has lots of classes. She has a YouTube channel, and all of her classes are very small too. She keeps them very intimate so she can give you personal attention. And she also has her own YouTube channel, but she also has a membership and a community of people that come together. It's very affordable. And so right now we've been talking a lot about finding communities, and I get Kay's emails, and I have been tempted to join myself many times. It's just a matter of actually finding the time. So, but I can highly recommend. She's a great astrologer, and everybody loves Kay. So, okay, now that we've talked about that, anything that I forgot to mention, Kay?
No, that's a good start.
Okay.
And happy to be here and talk to your people.
Okay, good. Okay, so, all right. So we were, before we turned the cameras on, we were sort of talking about the fact that everything has been shifting. It just started with Pluto going into Aquarius. And so you've heard me talk a lot about how 2025 is going to have all these major transit shifts. And with it is going to bring tremendous change. And we were sort of talking about how hard it is to imagine what this change is going to look like, and how can we as astrologers give you the information and predict. And the best way that I've learned to do that is to kind of look back at history and see things that have happened in the past and kind of think of like, how can this manifest again now, and also just look at the planetary energies. So I guess, let's just quickly touch base on that Pluto and Aquarius, since it just happened and it's such a big, harbinger of things to come. So, do you want to just kind of talk a little bit about your take on Pluto and Aquarius before we sort of then, ease our way into Saturn, and maybe that, how do those tie together?
Yeah, thank you. I think in many ways, yeah, we have to keep going backward to understand a little bit about the changes we're in. And so with talking about Pluto and Aquarius, I would want to look at Pluto and Capricorn starting in 2008, because we've all just been through it. And I'm assuming everybody here is old enough to have experienced it. But if you go back a little farther, you can remember Pluto in Sagittarius, or even in the early 80s, Pluto in Scorpio. Basically, every time Pluto goes into a sign, we get some kind of like major difficult energy that I'll call the curriculum. Pluto comes in and says, these are the corrupt problems that I'm going to deal with. Here's the preview of coming attractions. So Pluto and Scorpio in the early 80s, if you were around for that, that was HIV. And for sure, Pluto and Scorpio, sexuality was a really big deal, and death. And what are we going to do? We don't even know what it is at the beginning. Pluto and Sagittarius, extreme religions, and led to the plane crash of the World Trade Center. And now in 2008, we had a major financial crisis, and the world was melting down and banks were too big to fail. And what were we going to do about finances, which included the corruption of the big businesses, the governments, big school, big pharma? All of that has been on our mind. And my normal way of looking at Pluto in a sign is to think that about the first third, the first 10 degrees, we're getting that curriculum and it's really difficult and charged. And in the middle, it often just seems like we're in the soup of it and we don't know which way is up. But by the last third, we usually get some remedies, and we start to see the phoenix rising from the ashes of the complete devastation that has happened in that sector of life. So I've been asking myself for the last few years, why don't we have the phoenix rising from the ashes yet? Right? Why
Like, what
do we continue to
happened?
expose corruption? Like, oh, now this corruption and that corruption and this person and that person. It's just been kind of endless. So I started to tell myself, well, maybe because the traditional ruler of Aquarius is Saturn, just like it's the, current and traditional ruler of Capricorn, I started to think, well, I wonder if we can't really build the new paradigm and the new structure out of the ashes until we have Aquarius. And Aquarius, when Pluto first came into Aquarius in the spring of 2023, we had some level of that curriculum being given to us, right? Because that was when all the articles started coming out about AI, and ChatGPT was suddenly available widely. And everybody was saying, oh my God, the horse is already out of the barn. And what are we going to do? It's going to be a disaster. Tech companies, we started to see how much power they have. And if they decide they like you, you can be on social media. If they decide they don't like you or they don't like your message, they can just delete you. And we can look at some things that we think are fake news and think, oh, that's okay. But then we can think about ourselves as astrologers and go, well, what if they say that's fake and we don't want that anymore? So you realize that personal vulnerability that comes. So definitely technology and all the radical changes that are going to come about in the next 20 years are part of Pluto in Aquarius, and both showing us the challenges and the corruptions in the field, as well as major inventions and, a huge kind of revolution of life growing and evolving much faster than we can probably handle. And in terms of new structures, I was imagining that we would also have a sense of humanitarian energy, equality, equity, diversity of all kinds, because that's what Aquarius is about we're all equal and we're unique and we're different, and we're going to build this utopian society, perhaps. And to see what's just happened in the election, the only way I can make sense of it is to say that we cannot move from this crash of the structure that we've just been through for so many years since 2008. We must not be ready as a civilization to go more fully into equality and these new ideas in progress. Instead, we must need to have a shock, a radical change, something that we can't even have imagined, because that's always the interpretation of Aquarius or the planet Uranus is, as astrologers, we jokingly say, if you can predict it, then you're wrong, because anything you can imagine is not the venue of Aquarius. So that's my sense, is that we're going to have to completely shake everything up. And like you said in that video I saw of yours, Dabney, the wrecking ball, right? That there's a whole nother level of wrecking ball beyond what Pluto and Capricorn has already done that has to happen to break everything up for progress to emerge. And it's beyond what we were imagining.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting as I reflect because I was truly surprised by the outcome, clearly disappointed, but also in a very different place than I was in 2016. Very much kind of recognizing that no matter what happened, there were a significant number of people that said this is what I want, which is interesting because I don't feel like in 2016 that was my sense. I felt like people didn't necessarily understand, or I think people understood this time. And so when I think of Pluto's, the mundane aspect, the zeitgeist, I'm with you. Like, I guess, like, I'm so used to doing personal readings for people, and I really have seen in action in my own life and in my clients' lives where there is those three kind of buckets of Pluto, like the shock, the like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? The like, oh my God, I'm in it. And then kind of the phoenix rising from the flame. Like you integrate the lesson and like you're moving to a new phase. But now as I hear you talk and as I'm reflecting on, like we can kind of shorthand some of the things that, Pluto really like in hindsight, Pluto in Libra was like, women's liberation, and it was, the rise of feminism again, but then it was also divorces, the
Mhm.
rise of divorces. And, divorces didn't really go away, and the ERA didn't really get passed.
Mhm.
And Phyllis Schlafly came in and really screwed over all those other women. And then we had, AIDS. And I don't believe that the crisis was over by the time Pluto was in Sagittarius. And,
No.
there are still problems in the clergy. And there are still these mega churches that came about during Pluto in Sagittarius, and there's still extremism. So it's kind of interesting to see that on a more mundane level, it brings these issues to light, it puts a focus on them, but it doesn't necessarily go away overnight. And if you even think about like the Revolutionary War, like we always talk about the US Sibley chart, the Revolutionary War like didn't end until Pluto was at like 9 or 10 degrees of Aquarius. And so even though that we kind of say this is this liberation time, there's work to be done. So the election was Pluto in Capricorn. But I do genuinely believe Pluto does come and do its business, and I think we are going to see a lot of things around technology. But I also think that the rise of the billionaires and the billionaire class, I do believe that there will be some degree of reckoning with that with Pluto and Aquarius. So even though the problem is not going away overnight, I think there's a reckoning coming on a lot of different levels. So I think that brings me to my next question. Do you agree with what I just said, or like what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
no, I totally agree. And you're really right. There's always a difference between what's going on in the collective when the planet goes into a big sign like that, and what we see going on in people's lives, where I feel like there is more free will because one individual can apply free will to their own chart. So that's one of the things I want to say when we're talking today about Saturn going from Pisces to Aries. We can talk a little bit about what that means out in the outer world, you and I, but we're both evolutionary astrologers who focus more on individuals and, helping you as an individual work with the energy in your own chart. And that's where each person has choice. We're part of a whole collective. And if, half of the collective wants a particular political outcome, then the other half of the collective is disappointed. And that happens election to election in all countries.
Yeah. And you brought up another really great point that this is a part of maybe making it not just a bifurcation, that it's like just half and half. Like maybe there is another system where we have other voices and other parties, and that may be a part of the Pluto and Aquarius. So I know I invited you on to talk about Saturn. So thank you for indulging me and talking about Pluto, because I do think that they're all a little tied together right now as we
Mhm.
kind of shift over. But we've been talking a lot about Pluto and Aquarius, and I wanted to get your perspective because I know when I was at the OPA conference, I heard you talk about it, and you had some really great things to say about how important it is to kind of find other people, like-minded people and communities and groups. And I think that is going to be our sanity right now, is kind of finding our tribes and getting out of the house and, being with people, connecting. So, okay. So now Pluto, we got Pluto. We talked about Pluto. Then we're going to get Neptune. Well, that's for another day. Uranus for another day. But May 24th, 2025, we've got Saturn going into Aries. So
Right,
you want
right.
to
And I
set
can't
the
talk
stage?
about Saturn going into Aries without talking about Neptune first, okay, if you don't
Okay,
mind.
all right. Well, thank you. Then you know what? We may just change the name of this to 2025 with Kay Taylor. but with an
Well,
emphasis on Saturn.
because it all matters. Like even when we're talking to people about Pluto going into Aquarius, we need to keep our eye on the prize that Uranus is going into Gemini, and that forms a trine, and those two planets are going to be working in harmony out of what was birthed in the 60s when they were together, right? So now when you want me to talk about Saturn going into Aries, well, I have to talk about Saturn being in Pisces, since March of 2023, and we're about halfway now. But in order to talk about that, I need to reflect back to Neptune, which started coming into Pisces in 2011, 2012. It was in. And to me, that has felt like this waterfall of Neptunian Pisces energy in the collective and in your chart. Wherever you got Pisces in your chart, it was like a big expansion. And I will tell you, working with clients, that when Neptune was at 15 degrees of Pisces, so is Neptune the planet that's in charge of oneness and bliss and transcendent creativity and all of our psychic spiritual energies. It's the planet that connects us to the cosmos and all that is. That it being in its own sign, Pisces, when it was in the middle of the sign, that it was casting its energy in people's lives all the way from 1 degree Pisces to 29. So normally people would say a planet, maybe is, 3 degrees really strong, 10 degrees orb. But Neptune, in my mind, working through the sign of Pisces, has cast this big, effusive, major energy. It's been overwhelming in some ways. It's been connected to a lot of the water issues we have, flooding, hurricanes, tragic losses, including fires, diseases like the pandemic. All of those come under sort of the heavy side of Neptune and Pisces. But at the same time, we got relaxed laws on cannabis. We got gay marriage in many places. We got a lot of compassion brought into the world, a lot of understanding at a greater level around addiction and dependency. We've gone into plant medicine and the ability that it has for healing, and it's being more and more radically adopted in the medical and psychological field. So all these things have been happening with Neptune and Pisces, and each one of us probably was feeling in all these years like, okay, and am I going to be connecting to my intuitive spiritual vibration with all of this coming in? Or am I going to sit on the couch and binge watch TV and eat my favorite junk food? Because it's just all too much and I'm overwhelmed. So along comes Saturn, right? I think of like as the cleanup taskmaster, kind of like the Buddhist teacher.
Excuse me. I've never seen it on camera. Sorry, everyone.
That's
All right.
okay. We're human. So Saturn Pisces comes along like the Buddhist teacher that, loves you, but for your own good is going to smack you on the shoulder when you're slouching in your meditation. And that's what Saturn in Pisces has been doing now for a year and a half. It's been there going,
I
are
love
you
that.
going to be mature? Are you disciplined? Like, stop just thinking you can just float around like this or numb out with your dependencies. It's time to get serious about all things Pisces, because if you don't, you're going to be just overwhelmed and sick and discouraged and a victim and a martyr, which are all the more negative aspects of Saturn and in Pisces. And you're going to want to be real, have some structure, pay attention. Like what does Pisces mean in your chart? So if you've got planets in Pisces, it's been going through and talking to each one of those. You might feel discouraged and negative and depressed about that area of your life at first. But if you do the work, Saturn is always your friend, and Saturn will help you stabilize that energy in your life, which is super necessary to be ready for it going into Aries in May of 2025. And you
That,
looked like a light bulb went on. What did you want to say
well,
about
it
that?
was fascinating. I loved the Zen Buddhist analogy. And it really, I've talked a lot about the like surrendering, like the discipline of surrender and things like that. But I really love what you're saying about like you have to get disciplined around Pisces. And I don't feel like people have particularly becoming very disciplined. I think there has been that martyr, there has been that victim mentality. I think that that's been leading a lot of things where people have not been doing the due diligence necessarily. And so I think that that makes it that much more potent when Saturn goes into Aries.
It does, because what it does is it takes that serious, disciplined energy of Saturn into whatever quality of energy it's in. And if we don't do the Pisces really well at this point, then when it comes time to be, really strong and building some kind of foundation that's Aries like, we might be going off in directions that are not filled with fundamental compassion and a higher frequency energy. And then what we end up with is just, anger and self-centeredness and all of the negative sides of Pisces. I'm sorry, of Aries.
Right.
So the Pisces forms a foundation for this. And, I can go back, like, I've also been doing a lot of work on Neptune going from Pisces into Aries. And I know that's not our theme for today, but Neptune went into Pisces in the 1800s, like it right around the time of the Civil War. And those years before, uh, did I, s- I'm confusing those dates. Neptune went into Aries at the
Aries.
time of the Civil War. And before that, it was in Pisces. And what you see is when Neptune is in Pisces, a lot of new ideas come into the world imagination. There is like at that time period in the 1800s, the idea that people should not be slaves came up as a good idea. Women should have rights, workers should have rights. There were some interesting communal ideas about how maybe it would be a better way to raise children. There were all these kind of spiritual, creative, compassionate ideas. And then when Neptune went into Aries, then suddenly either those ideas moved quickly into accomplishment, or there was a fight about them, war about them, like the Civil War. And so there's a little bit of that same thing that we're looking at now with Saturn having been in Pisces, and now Saturn is going to go into Aries, and we're going to see the results of these last few years kind of on top of Neptune being in Pisces. And then Saturn now in Aries is going to say, what are we building? We're building something new. It's going to be pioneering. We're going to go for it. We need life force. We need vitality. And when Aries comes into any situation, there's often a sense of conflict, right? It's like, I think this is the right way to start it. No, I think this is the right way to start it.
I was going to ask you, in readings, when you counsel people, what can they do in their personal lives before Pisces, Neptune goes into Aries, and before Saturn goes into Aries? Like, what are some of the themes of things that you're kind of saying, hey, this is something that you can work on that is in the higher realms, that like a good expression of these energies?
Okay, so first let me talk about the fact that both Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces right now. So what you can do right now, listening to Dabney and I talk, is you can think about how you can be in a more sacred place in your life, how you can be more disciplined. Like I'm hearing from people all the time that they're getting the little intuitive message. Like they keep thinking, oh, I should meditate more. I should go out in nature more. I've got these books I want to read that are about spiritual things. I should read them. People coming to me because I'm clairvoyant trance channel, and I've been teaching intuitive psychic work for people for as many years as I've been teaching astrology. So people coming to me saying, I feel like I have to understand my intuition. I'm like, I get dreams. I know some things sometimes, but I can't quite uh, manage it. Like I can't get the messages I need when I want them. I don't know whether I can trust them. So whatever you can do to be in attunement with your natural intuition, all of these things relate to this download of Pisces energy, and then the Saturn saying, get serious about it. Be realistic, be earth-centered, like not just think, oh, I'm kind of in the flow sometimes, but how can you be conscious and in the flow regularly? And one of the things I recommend to my students is to meditate in the morning, the minute you open your eyes, before you move your body, before you get out of bed. Because once you get out of bed, you are likely to get distracted with things. You're on your computer and you're making your coffee, and then, check the phone, and all these things are happening. So if you wake up on your side and lying there, bring your hands together here and do really deep, slow breathing through the nose, which calms the nervous system. You'll find when you wake up, your breath is actually probably half of what you're capable of, like your lungs can really expand. And then after a few minutes of that, sometimes it's like it feels so great that, you can do it for a really long time, way longer than going and sitting on a meditation cushion. But then if you want to, and you've got the discipline for that, then you can go and meditate for real, like in a chair or on a mat, or you can do some yoga or go for a walk. Then you can take it to the next level. But being really aware and conscious from the moment you open your eyes, and then you can also do that at night when you get ready to go to sleep. Also, just come into really deep, slow breathing. There's a lot of extra yogic breaths that I teach to my students as well. So they really get into, kumbhaka holds and bandha holds and things like that. But just wherever you can do it. And people who are busy, because, I had kids at one point, and, I know that like sometimes people are, having to sort of get up and take care of other people, but there's just little spots in the day where you can bring the breath in and bring your own consciousness and get grounded. And Saturn in Pisces needs you to do that before it goes into Aries and it's time to launch. Because you've been getting ideas since 2023 about what you're here to do, what your cosmic Pisces mission is. And when Saturn represents mastery, success, and accomplishment, right? And that's what Saturn is doing. It's helping us create the accomplishment that our natal Saturn is asking us to do. So you always have to reflect back with the transit to what the original idea is. So now Saturn coming into Aries is saying, launch, go for it, pioneer, be brave, be courageous, get it done. So you need to know what you're getting done, and you need to have that sort of soul-centered alignment with it, and not just be getting something done that you think will make money or your parents want you to do, or whatever other head idea you have.
Okay, Kay. So this is when you were talking, I have a hummingbird feeder outside, and hummingbirds are very magical for me. And while Kay was talking about Neptune in Pisces, that we've all been getting downloads, right? But we haven't necessarily known what to do with them, right? And it wasn't until Saturn went into Neptune that we started to get like some structure around that. I think it's very important because not only were there was literally like 3 hummingbirds going nuts. I was distracted by them because they were just crisscrossing back and forth, and my cat was watching. And then you had like some little, like, kind of look like a butterfly behind you. It was so cool. So I think that everyone watching needs to pay attention to that, because Kay is clairvoyant. And I know that I did an interview with Rachel Lang not that long ago, and we talked about what is your special psychic gift. And so I know a lot of the people that watch my channel do have psychic gifts. We do have empathic gifts. We do have intuitive gifts. There's different ways of calling it. It's different manifestations, but something probably has been coming to you. And then you've started to think like, I need to act on this. And in my own personal life, I've been doing astrology for over 20 years, but it wasn't until Saturn went into that Pisces that I recognized that I could start a YouTube channel. right?
Mhm.
And so I love that, you're kind of inspiring people to really focus in on like, what is your gift right now? Because we're all in a little bit of like, oh my God, there's so much change coming. So many things are happening. What is my personal gift? Because 2025 is the time to launch, right?
It is so much between 2025 to 2026 because first Saturn will be coming into Aries. Neptune is also coming into Aries. They're joining up on exact on the 20th of February 2026, but they'll be dancing around really close to each other during the year, back and forth. And basically, my experience on the personal level with transits coming together and creating cycles is we have a very strong experience of them even when they're not exact. Like as humans, we tend to really put a lot of emphasis like, oh, February 20th, 2026, that's the day. But actually, not much usually happens on the day, but all the inner gyrations that are happening as we're coming toward it, that's when we're feeling it, we're making decisions, we're feeling the inner struggle, we need to be creative. So it's like now is good. You've got that movement of Pluto into Aquarius, so that's setting that bigger framework, sort of like the container around it all. And then all of next year, Saturn and Neptune dancing back and forth between Aries and Pisces. So the imagination and the spirituality, and then the action and the making it happen, and being brave, because it takes bravery to connect to what the soul wants and go for it, because it's not often what the society is suggesting is a good idea.
So I know that there's a couple people that are in our community that are launching things right now. They are launching, meditation classes and things like that. So it's really validating to hear this, how you counsel your clients and your community is kind of there's definitely alignment. So
Yeah. And there's something I want to say that doesn't come from astrology, but it comes from who I am as a channel. And I think at this time, people need to hear it. This was a message I got from Spirit in 2004, at the time that George Bush was being elected a second time and, really expanding the war into Iraq. And at that time, I had channeled way back in the Aries in the 80s. I had channeled a lot of things that were going to happen over decades. And it all coming to true along the way. Like things that I said, like, 20, 30 years ago came about. And then, but I could not make sense of the fact that things were going more conservative and more into a war at that time. And my spirit guide said, tell everyone that everything is on target, all the seeds have been planted, and it's very hard to watch the old paradigm crash, but you have to watch it crash. Don't be afraid of watching it crash, because the new world is already being built and you're all here together building it. And all you have to do is your piece of the puzzle. You just have to figure out what your piece of the puzzle is and do it, and connect with community of other like-minded conscious beings who are also making these changes. The old world will crash and the new world will emerge. And don't worry about it. And I think as we face the disappointment that many of us had about this election, that we have to come back to that and say, we maybe need more of a crash than we were thinking of. We were hoping that we were going to show our world sooner, right? But not everybody is ready for that. And so we have to watch more crashing. And just, that's really in my mind where the Saturn and Aries comes in. It's like we have to be really strong warriors, powerful, the long-term plan. Saturn is all about building something to last, slow, steady steps, deep foundation. And often we feel alone and depressed and discouraged in Saturn times. And yet Aries is about that bravery and courage and making it happen. We're doing both at the same time.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the timing of the Neptune. So Neptune goes into Aries in March. So they really are doing a dance together, aren't they?
They are like they're just, within a couple of degrees of each other and, go both back and forth. You may feel a little bit of a difference when one is in Aries and the other's in Pisces, but they are connected. And as I was telling you before this show came on, you know, my fundamental astrology is pretty much all Aries and Pisces. So I've been living with this my whole life. And when I was young, to be Pisces and Aries so strongly, it was really hard because the Pisces was so sensitive and intuitive and, emotional. And then the Aries was strong and independent and brave. And the Aries would do things that the Pisces just couldn't handle emotionally. And then the Aries thought the Pisces was a little wimp and didn't like it. So I was like within myself, I struggled and struggled. And only with some maturity did I start to see that when you have that Aries inspiration, and then I'm sorry, I get the words mixed up, the Pisces inspiration, and then the Aries makes it happen, right? The Aries goes for it. Like if you just have a whole lot of planets in Pisces, you tend to be so sensitive that you just can't even get out the door, right? If those of you who are listening, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, you don't really fit in the world when you have a lot of planets in Pisces or South Node in Pisces.
Or
But if you've
Moon in
got
Pisces,
a little bit of Aries, then you can take all those gifts and you can do something with it.
right? It's funny that you said the Pisces inspiration, but there is inspiration in Aries too, right? Like,
There is very much it's a real deep instinctual gut feel inspiration, whereas the Pisces is much more, kind of cosmic, comes from the dreams and visions.
yeah, and it's almost like we have to have that before we can come out into the world in in any kind of way that is giving to others, right? Like we have to have that sort of download from spirit. And that really is the 12th house into the first house, Pisces into Aries. And so this is giving me a whole new perspective on this planetary energy because a lot of what we're hearing, at least collectively, is like, oh, Saturn and Aries, that's going to be, hard. And I am right there with you. I'm excited about the opportunity for change, but embracing a healthy change and knowing that if we get this last piece of Saturn and Pisces right, and we're not in victim mentality, we're not in martyrdom, then it's actually we're acting upon something that has been the gift we've been getting this past year. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not that I want to be overly Pollyanna that we're not going to have difficulties. The truth is we always have difficulties. Doesn't matter where the planets are. People come in sometimes for a reading and they're, when's Saturn going to end? When's Pluto going away? They aren't, they're just moving a little bit to a new area of life and shining the light on something else. But we can find the way to connect in our own chart to what the meaning is of these planets and what the highest outcome would be, and we can work toward that, and we can understand what's going on in the world. Yes, I mean, people have been saying for years now that we're kind of in a civil war. It tends to take place on social media and not out on a field with guns, but it's pretty intense, the amount of divisiveness that we have. And so the question is, can we bring our compassion in? Can we bring our strength to fight for what we know is right? How can we operate as consciously as possible and understand that the world needs changing, and we may all have some different ideas about how to make those changes. It would be much nicer if we would collaborate on it and make those changes together, but for whatever reason at this point in time, we're just going to keep working on bringing forward our agendas, and hopefully more and more have it built, sort of have that Neptune and Pisces energy that is compassionate, that comes up with creative ideas, and the Aquarius of like what would be equal and humanitarian, that those energies will gain their rightful respect in our world.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. And I think then when we've got, since we might as well just bring in the piece about Gemini, because then Gemini, Uranus goes into Gemini, which is all new ideas. So, Kay, I love that you also look at like kind of the higher expression and what are, what things look like when you're off track, and then also collectively, but individually. So, I think that there is these planetary energies are building on each other. And what you downloaded in 2004, if we can all kind of integrate that into our lives, that there is something more beautiful being born. And if we have faith in that, and knowing that even people we completely disagree with want the same things in their lives as us. And there has been this kind of buildup of really the dark side of technology through social media, where we are having kind of a civil war, and there is nothing civil about it, right? The way people treat each other, and then sometimes you don't even know if the people are real, if it's just a bot. So maybe there is some sort of like break from the way that we've been fighting one another. There might be kind of a new way to approach one another, a new way forward. And Aries does often bring confrontations. It brings things to light, that frictions and conflicts. So I'm hopeful that it doesn't break out into something like historically civil war. Uranus and Gemini, I do know that in the US, we tend to like to go to war during Uranus and Gemini. So this is a caution. So, this is something to pay attention to, that was the Civil War, it was World War II, it was the Revolutionary War. So, as being very independent thinkers here in the United States, and people who like our freedom. Uranus, Gemini, there's going to be some independent thinking. There's going to be some, I want to do it this way. You want to do it that way. How are we going to do it differently, and new ideas? Do you want to kind of talk about a little bit about that piece of it coming in at the same time as that Saturn in Aries?
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that the air signs, Uranus in Gemini and in a trine to Pluto and Aquarius, to me indicates like radical new ideas that, bring about transformation and ultimately a deeper sense of who we are as humanity, and things moving very fast. And the idea that intelligence and the intellect and thinking matters. I think we're coming out of the Piscean age. People argue about when it starts, and I'm not going to get into that astrological dilemma, but we can kind of say the age of Christianity, and to somewhere around now or in the near future, we've been Piscean. So it's been more faith oriented, more religion oriented. And now the idea that we need to come together with intelligent thought is going to really gain a foothold in my mind. And I think also the fact that it's putting in trine the two planets that birthed all the changes in the 60s. Like, we haven't finished with this. Those changes were birthed when Pluto and Uranus came together in the mid 60s. And 2012 to 2015, hard squares between them, really testing them. And now we get some flow. And those ideas, even though it seems like right now there's great resistance to them, those ideas, in my mind, with a trine, are going to find their rightful expression. We're going to find a way to build more, better way of working with the planet, ecology, women's rights, the rights of all people, that has to come about. And with Aries, we get things maybe moving faster than we imagine, and more, new ideas coming in of how to solve problems, how to survive. There's, that piece of the Aries energy that I think we need to consider, is that we are going to be looking at survival. And it may mean that that's finally how people start to come together because it will be so essential. But basically, action, intelligence, quickness, new ideas, new inventions, that is what starts to come about next year and in the years to come. And following it out, I think for my Pluto and Aquarius talk at Astro Bash a couple of years ago, I think I followed the whole system out until about 2050. And that's like, sort of if you want to really think about this section that we're in, Pluto and Aquarius 2024 to 2044, but then there's a little bit of extra just beyond that that's really very connected to this cycle we're in.
I love that you bring up the trine too, because a lot of times we hear like, oh, Pluto and Aquarius, that was the French Revolution. But the French Revolution actually happened well into Pluto and Aquarius, and that was in opposition to Pluto, to Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to look at the whole picture as well. So, these things are not going to necessarily play out exactly as we think. I mean, there's themes, right? There's the themes that are embodied, but as people, we have free will. And how do we want to come together? And Uranus and Gemini, climate change, we may have half the country thinking it's a hoax right now, but maybe not in a couple years. Once we're well into Uranus and Gemini, there might be some solutions where we get to make things different. I'm hopeful. I'm always the optimist.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the optimist also. Mhm.
Awesome. Well, this turned into a talk all about 2025. So, okay, I'm super grateful. I am going to make sure everybody knows that this is a talk about 2025. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you would like to touch upon?
I'll just mention that the nodes are moving in 2025 as well. So we've had North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra. It's been all about connecting to our soul, vibrant energy, and letting go of overgiving to people. So if you've been thinking about that in your own life and that you're doing too much for trying to please other people, it's really time to go for it and, make that choice that makes you feel alive and free. But as they now move going into Pisces and Virgo, even though we're seeing that Neptune and Saturn are starting to go into Aries, we're going to get some nice soul-centered energy evoking Pisces for the next year and a half. So that's good too, keep us connected to spirit.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, I'm really grateful for all of your time, and I will make sure that everybody who watches this channel, I know that so many of you have gifts internally. So connect with Kay, join her groups, take her classes, like explore her YouTube channel, because I think that you have a much bigger audience out there that's waiting to learn all about what you're doing. And like I said, while you were talking, those hummingbirds were doing they were like, it was insane.
Mhm.
I wish I could have turned the camera. So I hope I don't sound like a crazy person, but I get very excited when I
Oh, well,
see
hummingbirds are the energy of joy. And in my mind, they're very Piscean. They're also a little Gemini, they're a little airy, flitting around, but they really do evoke that Piscean joy. So I'm glad that they showed up for us
yeah.
talking.
They
Mhm.
were validating everything you were saying, and I thought it was so powerful. So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us. And as always, there is a reason and a season for it all, and the universe is conspiring to help us. So, yeah. Until next time, stargazers.